In this lesson, we'll learn to avoid some common mistakes people often make when trying to link their Revit models. Alright, so we're at a point where we'd like to link this architect's model, which was created in the architectural template, with what's going on in a structural project template, which is where we're going to be actually conducting our analysis. Now, when you're linking your model from one discipline to the other, there's ways that you want to prepare your model so that when, let's say in our case, the engineer does bring in the architect's model, that certain things are displayed properly, and it just, reduces the time that, the person you're handing your drawing or model off to has to take in making corrections, but it also makes working with the process a lot easier, and it makes things work properly when you're conducting your analysis. So really quickly, I'm going to show you what happens if you try to link your model, but you don't take the necessary steps. So right now, as I mentioned, I'm kind of in this simple project, this architect's template, just so I can access this model, which will later make some changes. But when I'm a Control Tab, and what I'm here now is in O3 Begin, which is our actual structural template. So O3 Begin is Lesson 3, the beginning, and this is the template we'll actually be working in to conduct our analysis. But if I did want to try to link this in and I don't prepare my model correctly, I'm going to show you exactly what happens. So I'm in the structural template and I want to insert and I want to link Revit because I'm linking a Revit model within my Revit project. So I'm not going to use this one, but it's exactly the same file. I'm going to use this one just kind of as an example here. But if I link that one up, it's the exact same model into my project. You'll notice it's now in my structural project. But if I jump to a 3D view, you'll notice several things. One, all the architectural elements are gone. So the windows I had, the curtain walls, and the doors in the curtain walls are gone, and even the railing on my balcony. But also my structural walls and my roof are gone as well. You'll also notice one more thing. This area, these lines here are actually represent, or these sticks, they represent your analytical model. And how this is represented here is as if I have a beam system placed on the floor. So these are some things you'll notice you may actually run into when you're first linking up models. So things may not be placed on the correct level, certain things aren't displayed properly, and certain structural elements that you placed in your model aren't visible. So we're going to find out how to overcome those things. But while we're here, we'll kind of look at what we have in place. So since we're dealing with structure, we have our structural elements that are visible to us. But if I come here to our project browser and I click on our analytical model, you'll see this is exactly what we get, the analytical model. Basically all those little sticks that we saw within the structures. These represent all the different pieces of structure. So we got our beams, our columns, our beam system, so on and so forth. And these will be used to conduct our analysis. And this is what Revit will use to read the information that we provided. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to close out of this one here. We'll actually get rid of this, out of this, and we'll link it up the correct way. So when I remove that, or if I delete it, I need to make sure I remove link. So I may have another view open as well. All right, so we're in good shape. So let me just get rid of one more view just to kind of clean things up. All right, so here's our architect's model that we got from the architect. I'll Control Tab, O3 Begin, and we're back in our structural. So when we tried to bring this in earlier, you'll notice we had missing elements and things in the wrong place. Well, how do we overcome that? Well, you got to make sure it's modeled right from the beginning. So I'm going to jump back to that architect's model, and I'll show you a few ways that we can work around or actually solve those problems. First off, we should select on the elements anything that's structural, and within the project or the properties, we need to make sure that we check the box that lets Revit know that, hey, this is a structural element. So for instance, I can do these walls. I remember we didn't have walls in our initial run at trying to link these projects. So I'm going to right click and I'm going to select all my structural walls because I only have 2 of them in this case. And as I mentioned, we're going to go to the properties, and we need to come in here in this area, and we need to check the box that says structural. Now you can tell right here it's not. And you can also see down below that it says enable analytical model. Well, since this is not selected, we're not able to enable those elements within the analytical model. So let's go on ahead and select that. And you'll notice it automatically turns on enable analytical model. So I'll say apply, and we're good there. So I can click on my wall here, And if I come to my properties, I'll see, yeah, it's still structural and it will be enabled in my model. I'm going to do the same thing for this floor here. A lot of times when you're getting a model from an architect, it might just be a simple architectural floor and it's not specified to be structural. Well, you may want to actually do that in this case. So in this case, we have a generic floor, but there's no structural checked, so we'll check it. Now, when you're working with generic elements like this, that means a lot of times you may not have properties or physical, thermal, or what have you applied to elements within your model because it's just a generic model. It's just basically a form. So another way to kind of get around that is we can come back in here and we can go to edit. We'll edit its structure, and you can see here no material has been applied. Now, had we try to run this on our wall and we had that generic wall and we would try to link it or do an analysis on that model, we would have got a warning message and Revit would have told us, hey, there's no materials with physical properties applied to the structural elements you want us to analyze. You need to get that fixed. And this is kind of how you basically go about doing it. You want to make sure that you go into the structure and you apply a material, but you also want to apply a material that has physical properties. So I'll come up here and you'll see we'll go to concrete. So that floor is going to be concrete. So I want to apply the concrete material. Let's see if we can find it here. So I just want plain concrete. So I'm going to say concrete. For this case, we'll say lightweight here. But we also want to make sure that it has its physical properties assigned to it. So that's what these are here. Now, a lot of times, as I mentioned, if you are dealing with generic properties and things like that, you won't have materials with physical properties. So it's going to be important that we have this kind of information within our materials, within our building elements, so that Revit can do its analysis according to, the concrete compression, the strength, and things like that. So now that we got that taken care of, I'll say OK here, I'll say OK, and this should appear a little bit later on within our structural model. Now we also, I pointed out a little bit of issue we were having with our beam system, and we'll jump into that in a second. I want to make sure this floor here has its structural assigned to it as well. And it didn't, so we'll go ahead and select that. And it looks like we do have a material to it, but let's double check it real quick. Again, I'm double checking to make sure material is applied as well as physical properties. So we're in good shape. All right, so apply and OK. So we're in good shape. So let's go draw our attention to those beams that were placed improperly. And that's something you might run into a lot of times when you're dealing with people who are, modeling. They may have different ways that they get things placed, or they might not understand the proper way of getting something placed. So in our case here, we have our beam system, and I'm just going to simply select that. And when I come to its properties, I can see immediately, here's what we'll do. There it is. It's our work plane is where we're having our issue. So you remember that beam system appeared as if it was on level 1, which now we know exactly why, because it was on work plane level 1. So what I want to do is I want to edit that work plane, make the adjustments, put it on the correct work plane in this case, which will be the second floor since it's supporting the second floor. And then I want to apply an offset so that those are placed properly. So we'll edit work plane, and I'm going to select a new work plane. This time I'm going to say level 2. And you'll notice the beams will do some shifting and moving around here. They shot all the way up to this top here because I need to change the offset right now as an offset or an elevation of 9 feet above level 2. And again, this is going to go, we want it to stay close to level 2, but we want it to go downward because it's actually going to be supporting the floor. So in this case, I think the floor is a foot thick, so I'm going to say -1 feet. Say apply, and you can see it's now placed in the proper position, back exactly where it needs to be. So now once we bring this into our structural situation, things should be, one, visible and also placed in the proper placement. So I'm going to go ahead and save this, say file, I'll save that file, and then Control Tab, yes, and we'll jump to 03 begin, and this is where we'll actually start bringing in that model. So what we'll do now is we'll really quickly link this into our O3 Begin structural template. And after we do that, I'll show you what's visible, what's not, and then in the next lesson, we'll learn how to do some copying and monitoring. So like we did last time, let's go ahead and insert. We'll link model. And again, I need to make sure that this one's saved. So we'll save it one more time for good measure. But we also need to make sure it's closed because it won't let me link it if it's closed, or I mean, if it's already open within Revit. So we'll get out of the architect's model and we'll now focus our attention in this area. So now we'll go to Insert, Link Revit. We'll grab our architect's model, bring them in here, and now when I jump to my 3D view, you'll see I have my floor in place here. I have my floor in place there. We have all our walls in place, and we also have openings in our walls. And we also made the correct adjustment to get our beam system placed properly. So now we're in good shape. So that's how we basically link this up from one discipline to the next. And this is how you kind of overcome some of those issues you might run into when you're getting a model from someone from a different discipline. So now that we know how to deal with those issues and we have this linked, in the next lesson we're going to copy monitor, where we'll take certain elements here and we'll actually bring it into our structural our work environment. So I'll meet you in the next lesson and we'll get it done.